Welcome to Trigger Talk, your place for everything first-person shooters like Battlefield, Call of Duty, and so much more. I'm your host, Sage Goodwin, and as always, I'm joined by Sammy Boy. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
Doing fantastic, ready to rock and roll, back and ready for action. And today we're talking about the future of Battlefield. Whatever the next game is going to be, we have some interesting details on a job listing that could change this perspective that we have on the next Battlefield game. So let's jump in. Sammy, do you feel like the game industry, specifically in first-person shooters, is kind of dead?
Very much so. I feel like this might be the worst period of the FPS genre ever since its inception.
Which is weird.
It's very rare. Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? It shouldn't be, but it just is.
If you look at the numbers of how many first-person shooter games and live service free-to-play titles have come onto the scene and blah, 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 it should be the best year for first-person shooters ever. But it kind of just feels like everything's dead.
Yeah. I don't know if it's like I remember with like Marvel, a lot of people use the phrase franchise fatigue. I don't know if it's like genre fatigue. I feel like, at least for me, that is potentially what's going on, that I don't know, I'm just not as interested in it as I used to be because I've played so many different shooters over the years. So that's probably part of it, but I still feel like if there's a good enough shooter, that will kind of fix that, because I feel like I've had that in the past before too, where I've had periods of like just not really, I've played too many shooters back in 2015 and I was getting bored of it, but then Battlefield 1 comes out and it fixes that issue. Like, it just doesn't, I don't know, it just feels like a combination of issues with the genre and really just the gaming industry, which we've talked about a lot on this podcast, but then also just a bit of burnout. I think when you have so many shooters that are just kind of pretty mid, there hasn't been a really an amazing shooter in a long time. I would probably say like Fortnite and Warzone, and that's it. And that was 2020, and Fortnite was 2017, I want to say. So yeah, I don't know, I just think when you get so many mid games, none of them are really bad. I haven't played a really bad shooter in ages, but they're just all they all leave you wanting more. Like, it's kind of like, this is all right, but I wish this and this was done better. And I think that really sort of contributes to the burnout a little bit for me.
Yeah. I feel like too, you mentioned this a little bit about this idea that there should be, or there's this idea of genre burnout or franchise burnout or whatever you want to talk about, that specific type of burnout. But clearly with Deadpool versus Wolverine, there are examples of this not being true. But the difference is you need to have a core experience. You need something that is just genuinely good, no matter the type of game or what have you. And I feel like we're just waiting for that. So much of the first-person shooter industry is around live service games, free-to-play games, and this change in how games are made and how games are monetized, and also the disruption in the game industry right now. So it feels like it's almost less to do with a type of game in particular, but more with the industry. But you also have was it Myth Wukong or whatever is happening right now? Everyone's raving about it. It's the new It game until people find out, and then they make a bunch of clones on it, and then later on something that we've probably seen in the past just comes with a new fresh take, and then rises above the other. So I do wonder what the FPS industry is going to be like as we go forward, because, like we said, the industry as a whole on paper should be thriving, but it kind of just feels dead in so many ways.
Yeah, and it's weird because by the numbers, you wouldn't probably think that. I feel like it's really still very popular. Call of Duty always sells crazy numbers. Like there's still a lot of people playing Fortnite, a lot of people playing Apex. Like I see Apex as like a game. I haven't heard anyone say the word Apex in like 6 months, but it's got such a big player base. So it's like maybe it's just me. I don't know. Maybe I'm detached from the.
Am I the problem?
Yeah.
No, the kids are the problem.
So like, yeah, it's a weird time where it feels like all of the discussion you hear about the FPS genre, whether it's people talking about the whole genre or like the game that they like, so Call of Duty or whatever, all of the talk you hear is kind of like negative of like, oh man, it's just another boring game or whatever. And yet the numbers are still crazy. So is that a case of us just being the, in the minority of like,
yeah, are we not the target audience anymore?
Yeah, like are we legit? Are we getting too old or what?
Are we the old man that yells at cloud now?
Yeah, like that is a genuine. Because that's another thing I've seen a lot of talk about. I saw when the Splitgate 2, like I guess it was the beta or something that they had, I think last week or the week before. Well, I don't know if it was a beta or like some sort of presentation, but there was people playing it, and like people were, as you do in a shooter, people were trying very hard, right? And there was a lot of discussion about, like, no one was talking about, oh man, that game looks good. All the discussion I saw was, this is why we can't have good shooters anymore, because everyone's trying so hard. And I personally don't have an issue with that because I'm the same. I make content, so I'm always trying to get good footage, right? That's just every game I'm in, I'm like, all right, I need to play as good as I can. And so it's not so much a complaint of like, oh, everyone else is doing it. Like I do it too, but that's kind of where the industry is, that it's like there's no such thing as casual shooters anymore. Back in the day, I used to just jump on COD, and even if I had a bad game, it was fun. Nowadays, if I have a bad game, it's like, oh, I'm getting off. I can't be bothered because it's just so like sweaty and stuff. So
yeah,
I feel like that's part of it too. But I don't know. It's another thing where I feel like that shouldn't be part of it, because I personally enjoy competition. Like I'm a very competitive person, so it's not. I shouldn't care about that. But then, yeah, maybe when I say I'm a competitive person, I'm also getting older. So maybe, like I just said, maybe I just don't like competition anymore, and I'm a boomer now, and the kids are too good for me, and I'm like, don't like it anymore. So I don't know. It's just it's a weird time in this genre that. I was saying just before we started recording that I'm kind of taking a break from my shooter channel at the moment to focus on the other channels, because I'm just not enjoying. Like I was covering X Defiant, nothing really went wrong with that game. I'm just not really. I'm not addicted to it. I'm not thinking, oh, I can't wait to jump on and play. I'm just kind of like bored of shooters at the moment, and that's for me. That's very rare, because I've always been like the shooter guy. Like I always played single player games, but the constant through line of my like gaming career since I was a young kid till now, that whole time that I've been gaming, I've always been a shooter guy primarily, or at least, there'd be times when a big single player game would come out and I'd like focus on that, but then straight back to a shooter afterwards. So for me to be not interested it kind of says a lot to me. Like it's pretty rare that has ever happened. And I'm not sure if it's to do with the games themselves or me or the industry or, even things like you said, the live service model. Maybe I just don't like that and I don't know it or something. I can't put a finger on it, but I'm just bored, man. I'm bored of the constant new shooters coming out, and they're all 6 out of 10 and they're fun for a month. Like I need something to grab me. The only thing that I think has grabbed me recently is Marvel Rivals, when that beta was out recently. Yeah. But now that I'm worried I'll be bored of that when it launches later this year. I'll be bored of it like in a month. So yeah, I'm not too sure, but that's where it's perfect topic for us to cover, because I feel like Battlefield's the game that I can stick in there with all the time. I've always kind of, even 2042, like I played that for every season. So hopefully they can get this one right, and we can have something to play consistently, because I think that's what I need. I'm sort of bored of just flipping between new shooters every 3 months, and they're all just not that good.
Yeah, it's. Do you know the meme where it's the clip from Rogue One? It's like seriously, a man of your talents.
Yeah.
It's like single player games. Really,
Yeah.
a man of your talents.
Legit. That's actually how, like, I am Galen Erso. I'm just going to live on a farm. I'm like, nah, man, I'm too old for this. I'm just playing. I'm out here playing Outlaws, and I've been playing old games. I've been playing Shadow of Mordor and stuff. Like,
oh yeah, dude, I've been
man.
itching to go back to Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I'm about to replay Assassin's Creed 2 for like the 14th time. So like, that's the point I'm at, where I'm like, yeah, I've tried all these new games. I think I'm going to go back to my comfort games, and that'll see me through the rest of the year.
I also wonder too, like, just personally in our lives, it's very busy in a variety of ways.
Yeah.
And it's much more calming to go home after a full day of work and play a single player game than it is to just hop on and just be sweaty and go on Apex or go on X Define or go on the finals or what pick your poison and go on and just grind it out. It's fun in spurts, but like after you've been stressing at work, going home and just grinding again, it's not necessarily my cup of tea.
Yeah, that's a good angle to come from. I've never actually really thought of that like, you know, it's not just us two. Like, everyone's busy. Everyone, when they're our age, is getting busier. Like, I feel like you just kind of, from the age of like 18 to like maybe 30, you just constantly get busier, like every year. And yeah, maybe that's a big part of it, that I just can't be bothered. Like, it's maybe not that I don't enjoy the grind because I do, like you said, in spurts. When there's a new shooter and I have that addicted feeling, it's all I want to do is just jump on that game and grind it. But yeah, maybe the constant fact that we're busy all the time, and even just stress, even if I'm not that busy but I'm really stressed about this certain thing, then yeah, the thought of jumping on and getting shut on by a bunch of 18-year-old kids, that just maybe doesn't excite me like it used to.
Yeah, it's understandable. I think it's interesting to think about the types of experiences we're all looking for and what that looks like. But I will say, though, I did hop on and play some Apex, and I watched a buddy of mine play some Apex, and that game is completely different now.
Is it? I haven't really seen much from it for like a long time, so it probably would look very different to me.
Very, very different experience, as well as just generally they've got a bunch of different modes now too. So like, there's this one mode that you just kind of, as long as someone is alive, you can respawn as much times as someone is alive.
Yeah, I think I think there's like a version of that in Warzone. So I think I know roughly how that works. It's kind of
it's quite fun.
Yeah, I think that seems to be the path that those battle royales are sort of taking, where it's now a bit less do or die, and it's a bit more, it's like the middle ground between like a proper, you know, like PUBG level of stress and a casual game, and it's not like, right in the middle, which I definitely found fun when I was playing a lot of BRs. Like, that's a fun little sort of section of the sub-franchise, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I did hop on it, and I will say that was quite fun. On the topic of, like, I feel like a lot of this could be kind of just changed, or at least made better, or whatever definition you want to have. I feel like it would be a lot easier if we had a Battlefield that was like something that we enjoyed, because that was like our main thing. This started as the Battlefield show. This was something that we wanted to showcase our love for, and we also enjoyed talking about the game industry. But if we had like a Battlefield game right now that was like really intriguing, had the core features, I don't think we would have this like identity crisis, because a lot of our online shooter identity was wrapped into Battlefield.
Yeah, that is a good point. And that was always the thing, actually, that I would often balance multiple. So I'd be playing Warzone for my kind of sweaty, you know, like, I feel like jumping on and really like trying hard. I'd play that. But then when I kind of got bored of that, I'd always return to Battlefield, and I'd kind of even just even in the same day, I'd play like an hour of Warzone and an hour of Battlefield. And because I don't have that right now, maybe that's part of it. Maybe that's why I'm so bored of shooters, that I don't have my comfort game to fall back on. So it's almost like the security blanket type situation of, that's the game that I just know, even when they're pretty bad, I feel like I always tend to enjoy them. So yeah, that's really what I'm looking forward to, is just at some point next year, probably, I guess around the middle of the year, we're going to start getting, announcements and all that kind of thing. And yeah, hopefully that brings me back. I'm almost going to try and just avoid shooters for a little bit, I think, to have like a full-on reset going into the next Battlefield. And if I feel like if the next Battlefield's good and I've had like almost a year off from like regularly playing shooters, I might be just full hooked on that again, which is kind of what I want. Like, that's such a good feeling. There's no better feeling as a gamer than like that game that just hooks you in, and you're at work and all you're thinking about is, I just need to go home right now and play Battlefield. Like, that's my favorite feeling when it comes to especially shooters. It's different with single player games, but with the shooter, there's no better feeling. So that's the one thing I'm hoping with Battlefield. And yeah, we're going to have to wait and see. We've talked about this. I think whether it was the last pod or the one before that, we definitely talked about how we've kind of lost a bit of trust in them. So they got to earn that back. But yeah, I'll always be that cautiously optimistic guy that still holds on a lot of hope for the franchise, I think.
On that topic, talking about dissolving trust with DICE and its focus on Battlefield, there's been a new job listing, and part of the requirements for the next Battlefield game includes a requirement to have some experience working on open world projects. And I wanted to bring this up as a topic for today's episode because of how interesting that could be, and also how terrible it could be in that same regard, because there are multiple ways this could go. I think the first gut reaction a lot of people have is, okay, here we go, Battle Royale 2.0. What's going to happen now? Because those are semi-open world games in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I would count like a Fortnite or a Warzone as like, at least the map is an open world. It's no different than...
It's quite large.
Yeah, a lot of those
especially
are no different
Warzone.
than like even with Outlaws just coming out, I would say like Outlaws as a map, say like Toshara, the first map you sort of on, that's probably around the same size, maybe a bit bigger, but it's like not that different than a BR map. So that's definitely one angle that you could, it's not that much of a reach to consider that being some sort of BR or like, some second evolution of Hazard Zone or something like that.
So I think that's the first thing. There have been various rumors around Battlefield and a reported or rumored or theorized open world edition, something past Firestorm. Takes a lot of the learnings of Firestorm and kind of improves them. I think, though, something that could be quite interesting, and maybe it's a mode, maybe it's just like a feature or like a party management thing. Destiny had this kind of like open world area that you'd go in and have adventures in, and then you could go do raids within. Almost MMO type experience. But this is also something that they could do to expand on this idea of a Battlefield universe. What do you think?
Yeah, I never actually considered the Destiny sort of option. That's not a bad shout, especially with how like there's been a lot of issues with Destiny and mostly with Bungie. But the last update they did was like people were praising it like crazy. So Destiny has had a lot of like positive chatter over the last year or so, I would say now. So yeah, something I didn't consider, but it's not a bad, not to say I would definitely want it, but it's not a bad shout for where they could potentially be sort of thinking. But my two initial thoughts, I actually didn't even consider a battle royale until you just said it either. Mine were completely different. I initially thought, oh god, they're doing the Call of Duty open campaign where it was kind of like, it was not quite open world. And to be fair, I didn't play this. This was in Modern Warfare 3, I think. They had like non-linear story. So obviously the plot points are like linear. You still have to do the same parts of the story, but there was just, it would kind of spawn you into an open world, and it was just, you had like 3 objectives you had to do, and they were all in different spots, and then it was up to you to approach how to do them. And people like really, really, really roasted that. Like, it was really just the worst campaign that's ever been made for Call of Duty. And so my thought process was, oh God, they want to do that, but for Battlefield. And with a lot, they brought people from Call of Duty over to Battlefield as well. And that was even in the lead up to 2042. So that even concerned me more of like, okay, these people are bringing their ideas from COD, but they're not the good ideas that we want. They're bringing all the bad stuff over. So that was my initial thought. Then I did, and this wasn't really even my thought, it was more something that I saw a lot of people talking about on Twitter, that it's probably not that much different than the war stories that were in Battlefield 1. They were pretty much open world type of settings as well, with like some of them were linear, but I remember there was a few in that like the tank story.
Yeah.
There was that mission where you had to go and get like some parts for the tank to fix it, and you would go out, and it was, I wouldn't call that open world, but you know what I mean. It was a very like open
exploration
mission. Yeah, like I'm not sure what you would really define that as, but that's something that I kind of thought, okay, maybe they're going to go back to the war stories, because this game is obviously going to have a campaign, and it needs to be a good one. And I think realistically, even though like Battlefield 3 and 4's campaigns were good, but I actually think that the war stories in Battlefield 1, and then were they called war stories in Battlefield 5 as well? I can't remember, but
I think everyone referred to them as war stories, whether or not they were actually war stories.
Yeah,
who could tell?
But like that way of doing a campaign, I actually really like those. I like where it breaks it up into like, I don't know, 5 or 6 little stories, and then it's just like, it's almost like 5 mini campaigns instead of a big one. I actually really liked that. And I think that if they could do that again with, some sort of, it doesn't need, I'm not talking actual open world, like whole campaigns, but just like the way that they did it and even in Battlefield 5, I remember there was one mission with like it was like on an airfield, and you had to like sneak in. There was like multiple different ways you could go in, and it was completely up to you to sneak in, and like you had to turn off the alarms or something. That stuff I actually didn't mind. I think that stuff was fine. So that was the other angle that I thought, maybe that's what they're going for. Because realistically, if it's a job for an open world sort of job description, like that could mean so many things. And I think all of them tend to probably focus around the map more than the actual, whether it's an open world game or just whatever. But I think most of that will be to do with the map. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. But that's kind of my thought process of like hoping it's the same sort of thing of like war stories. Because also, I would say that's the best way for them to introduce a lot of different characters, because they clearly want to have this like Call of Duty thing where there's like Captain Price and there's like notable characters that we all know. I feel like they want to do that so badly with Battlefield and have like people we all know, like an Irish, for example. Even then, Irish, I don't think is like he's not a household name. No one, like we know Irish, but no one else, even people who have played a lot of Battlefields wouldn't know who Irish is. And I think they want that really, really bad. And having the war stories is a good way to introduce a lot of different people, because you could have 5 stories. Each of them have, a story about a squad of 4 people, and that's like 20 people you're introducing. So yeah, that's where I would guess it's going to go, but that's not based on much. That's just a straight up guess. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it pans out. And I just hope it's not those Call of Duty open. I think it was referred to as like open combat missions or something, where it was just you spawned in, they would like drop you off in a chopper. And it's like, all right, we've got to turn these alarms off on that side of the map. You've got to go plant a bomb on the other side of the map. Then we've got to go here and kill these people. You can do them in any order. And yeah, it looked very. I didn't play it, so I can't judge it too much, but it looked very bad, and like I never heard a single person say it was good. Everyone was like, "This is the worst campaign I think I've ever played."
I didn't even consider it to be like the campaign part, which makes a lot more sense when you really think about adding an open world element to a first person shooter game. And I think if done well, I like your idea of almost having like war stories attached to an open world, and you kind of play different characters within that single world. I think that could be quite interesting, almost like maybe it's the same mission played from multiple angles, accomplishing different things.
Yeah.
That's an easy way to kind of like take advantage of the work that was already done into the map, and also do something quite intriguing that incorporates the specialists, which I assume they're going to have similar characters, maybe the same characters. If their whole goal with introducing the specialist system was creating this world and cast of characters to continue on, it would make sense.
Yeah, and that's a good point about what you said of like having the same mission but from different angles. That would actually be really cool if there's this big, I don't know, we've got to sabotage, like we're playing as the Americans and we've got to sabotage like the Russians launching a rocket into space, which will allow them to be like the dominant force or something. And so that mission is like one squad has to go in and plant a few charges on the rocket, and then another squad has to go and do this other thing, and another squad has to go do this other thing, and they're all at the same time, but you play them all individually. So you do like planting the bombs first, but then in the next war story, it's the same time frame. You're doing that at the same time you were just doing the last thing, but it's from a different perspective. That would actually be really cool, I feel. And it could make this story, it could be a story that takes place over the course of like an hour, but it's just a 10-hour campaign with like 10 different perspectives or something. Like that would be pretty cool. So yeah, I'm interested to see how it goes. I'm not really sure what to expect. I feel like I kind of know what to expect with the multiplayer, but with the single player side of this game, I don't know if they'll go back to like old school campaign of like, Battlefield 3 and 4 era, if they'll go to war stories, or if this will be just like some legit open world, like an open world shooter, or I don't know. It could be anything really, because they've always been a bit like Call of Duty's is always the same. It's always just like maybe a 6-hour story from A to B. Like it's always the same, whereas Battlefield just hasn't had that. So yeah, very keen to see what happens. I don't think we'll know, unfortunately, for a long time, but this job listing is definitely thrown a spanner in. Like no one would have questioned anything about the campaign until we saw this, and then we're like, oh, what are they doing here? And that's the thing, like you said, it might not even be to do with the campaign. It could be literally just all to do with the multiplayer. So yeah, it's going to be just like the lead up to 2042. It's going to be just a fun time to talk about all this stuff. It's still some of my fondest memories of 2042 is just the lead up and the amount of hype and speculation and all that kind of thing. I love that in the lead up to any Battlefield.
It's always fun speculating, theorizing, hearing all the rumors, seeing what's going to work, what's not going to work, getting overtly hyped just to get disappointed at launch. The best parts of any Battlefield experience. I do find it interesting to see, like, we skipped a game with the campaign, and DICE has always struggled with the campaign. It's not surprising that they've pushed further and further to not include it. Every chance that they've gotten, they've tried not to include it. If you look at Battlefront 2015, didn't have a campaign, and a lot of people criticized them for that. That was like one of the main criticisms of that, alongside the class system, which honestly sounds very similar to Battlefield 2042.
True. Didn't even think of that.
But unlike Battlefield 2042, Battlefront 2015 actually played well and was fun. So I think there is a lot of expectation riding on this, and there's not a whole lot of experience that they've been able to play with in the campaign side of things.
Yeah, that's the other thing, what I just said about, like, they've always done it a bit differently. And I mentioned they've done the war stories, they've done the more linear stories, they've also then just done no story at all. So we've got kind of three, since like Battlefield 3, we've kind of got three different types of campaigns they've done, of the linear, the war stories, and none. So it's just zero expectation for me. I have no idea what to expect and what it's going to be like at all. I'm sure it'll be somewhat decent, but yeah, I really got not even any hopes for, like, I don't even have an area of like, oh, I really hope they do it this way. I actually don't care. As long as it's decent, I'm pretty happy with that. But then with shooter campaigns, when it's like attached to a multiplayer game, they kind of always tend to be not that good. I feel like Battlefield's never done a campaign that I was like, that was like phenomenal. They're always just kind of like, yeah, it was pretty good.
Battlefield 1.
Yeah, I would say it was the best, but I still wouldn't say, if I can, and I would actually say it's probably the best single player like element of any multiplayer game that I've played. So comparing it to all of the shooters, I would agree, but comparing it to like a single player game,
story based game, yeah.
it's they never reached that height, which is fair because it's not really their focus. They're always trying to focus on the multiplayer, and the single player is there as just a little extra bonus almost. So that's not like even a criticism for me saying like, oh, they suck. Like they do what they need to do, but yeah, like I don't usually love the stories that much. And like you said, Battlefield 1 is probably the exception. Even Battlefield 5's was fine as well. But even Battlefield 3 and 4, I liked them. They were fine, but they're not that memorable. I can remember the first mission of Battlefield 4 where you like crash into, you like Irish saves you from the car when you crash into the water, and there's that mission going through like almost a big construction zone sort of thing. That's the only thing I can remember. And then the ending with like, I think it was in China. That's the only thing that I can remember, even though I liked it. So yeah, that's kind of my thing with the campaign. I don't really care too much if it's not phenomenal or anything. I just hope it's not like trash. Like that's my only hope, really. Which that's the other thing. They never are that either. Like I don't think I've ever played a Call of Duty or Battlefield campaign and been like, that was genuinely terrible. Like they're always just kind of like a good 6 out of 10, which is all they really need to be, I guess.
Yeah, it's like either people only play the multiplayer or people only play the campaigns of any given shooter. Yeah. Like I know a lot of people that will just buy Call of Duty for the campaign, good or bad. Like they just like the experience of Call of Duty in the realm of the campaign, which I'm one of the weirdos that like kind of. And I enjoy both. Like if there is a campaign, I'm going to play that, and then I'm also going to play the multiplayer. Yeah, but in the grand scheme of things, the majority of time spent in any FPS shooter, if it has a campaign, is going to be multiplayer because you just have more experiences with it. You're not going to go in and play the campaign several times. Yeah.
And that's the thing of like, that's why they don't need to be amazing. It doesn't need to be the best single player story ever, because that's not their focus. Doesn't mean they can't try, but I don't think anyone will criticize if it's like a 5 or 6 out of 10. If it gives us some good story, like good character moments, especially if those characters are in the multiplayer. Like if they bring, I'd imagine they're going to go back to the class system like completely, but I feel like they will still have specialists in a way of like, you can still pick your character. Like you're an assault class or whatever, but you can also, it's like a skin essentially. I feel like that's how they're going to do that, because I just feel like they're so desperate to have like, it's always been a faceless shooter. It's always been a shooter with there's no guy on the cover. Like obviously there is on every cover, there's a guy, but like, I don't know who those characters are. On Battlefield 4's iconic cover, who is that? I don't know who that is. I don't think it is anyone. That's the thing. And I think they want like their Captain Price on the front, unless things have changed from what, that whole Battlefield universe, the thing that they talked about back in 2021. But I still have that in my head. So I feel like they will do the whole like specialist thing, just not in replacement of the class system. And then if they do that, then yeah, give us some cool story moments with those characters. Make me care about Falk and stuff. You know, whether they use those characters again. I feel like they won't. I feel like the the reputation about those characters is tarnished. But
Yeah.
yeah, make me care about the characters, and then that's really all it has ever been for me. Like I just don't really care about it that much, other than a few moments that make you go, "Oh, that was really," a big epic moment here and there, and a character dies and it's sad, and that's really all it needs, I think.
Yeah. I on the idea of like the open world aspect, they could also do something. They could have like an experience almost similar to like Jedi Survivor, where it has like vignettes of locations that are various sizes that you can explore around. And maybe that's kind of the network of the story that they want to tell. That's kind of like the only other way that they could really piece it together, in my opinion, where you almost have like a best of both worlds, where it's smaller scale, but you get the benefits of feeling more like an open world.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just a mode that is something along those lines. It's really confusing.
Yeah. I do wonder, like, because like you said, there's so many things that could fall into like technically an open world. Even just realistically, any of the maps from any Battlefield are kind of open world. They're no different than, they're obviously just slightly smaller, but they are open. You don't just have to go to from A to B. You can go wherever you want. Whereas in Call of Duty, it's very much like that's not open world. It's a little arena sort of thing. So yeah, I wonder if we could even just be, which is always just fun anyway, to be honest, but we could be just massively over speculating on this, and it could just be they want someone
bring up a good point
who wants to make the actual maps, like I don't know.
That's exactly what I was going to point out. You make a good point that they literally could just be saying, hey, open world games require a level of consistency and quality in terms of the variety of the map that I think Battlefield 2042 in particular was just lacking. So maybe they are looking for someone to focus on the expansion of the actual experience of the Battlefield maps, rather than like what we're saying of incorporating an open world aspect into the shooter itself.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, that when you play any open world, I'm thinking like Assassin's Creed games or like Elden Ring or Skyrim, if the map sucks, the game sucks. It's the same as any shooter. If the maps in a shooter suck, the game generally will suck. And so maybe that could legitimately be it, that they're just looking for someone who has experience, because I haven't read the full article, but pretty much the job listing pretty much seems to be asking for like them to have experience making like open world stuff. They might just want that to implement that into the base maps, and that could literally be it, because like you said, I think the 2042 maps really lacked a bit of soul. The layout, I guess, was fine. They didn't look, it's like that thing of you can't really pinpoint too much about what's wrong with those maps. If you ask me to objectively tell you what's wrong with like outside of maybe Hourglass, because that map was just straight absolute ass, but like all the other ones, say like Kaleidoscope, I can't really put a finger on why that sucked. I can't actually sit here and write an essay about what part was wrong. It just lacked a bit of soul to it, and I think that's a big part of open world games, is having that, maybe the level of immersion that we don't usually care about in the multiplayer game, but maybe that's a big part of it. Because realistically, you look back at all the Battlefield 3 and 4 maps, they were immersive. There's all bits of freaking debris all over the place, and there's papers flying around on Siege of Shanghai, and like there's just a lot of detail there. So it could just be, but also like
things there. I was watching like a video essay on Battlefield maps, and it was like making the point around how like in past Battlefield maps, you would, and instead of having like, you've got the objective in one location of the map. Obviously, your goal is to support the objective, whether that is claiming a capture point, whether that is getting kills or what have you. on your way to the objective, there are things happening. There are skirmishes that are taking place in locations that are revolving around the objective but are not the objective. And I feel like that's a key part of Battlefield 2042's lack of soul, is on the path to an objective. You're not randomly running into a 2v1 or a 3v2 or a 3v3 or a 17 versus 6 or what have you. It just doesn't happen. More than likely, you're going to see like 3 people on the entire path to your objective, and everyone's going to be just there. There isn't this world building or experience of like stuff happening on your way to an objective.
Yeah, and that's one thing that like I feel like that is the part that makes those games feel like a real war when you think about in an actual, and again, I'm not in the military, so I don't know what World War II was like, obviously, but from all the movies and stuff, all the stuff that you see, these characters, their ultimate goal is to get to this town to whatever. I'm thinking of like Saving Private Ryan. They've got to take Private Ryan to this place to get him out of there, right? But on the way, there's that many little things that they have to, they're just walking through a field and oh my God, a tank has just come into the field and they're now in battle. That is the stuff that makes it feel like you're playing, like it is immersive. And I think back to even say like Siege of Shanghai, that's kind of one that I always fall back on, that you'd just be doing your own thing and then you would be going from like one of the outer flags to try and get to the, to the top of the tower. But what do you know? There's a tank at the bottom of the tower trying to blow it up, shooting the pillars. And even though that's not directly, it's not looking at you, it's not waiting there for you. But if you try and run past that and get into the building, it's going to kill you. So there's now a new problem. Yeah. You're not just, okay, I'm going to the tower. Now it's, okay, I'm going to the tower, but I need to solve this problem first. And those are the moments that, like, to me, make Battlefield and just really any shooter, especially that's a big thing in Battle Royales as well, is that all right, I've got to get to the circle. We could just run there, but then when you run there, this team's coming up on us. We've got to defend ourselves. Like, those are the moments that really hook you as a player, I feel. Whereas when it is as simple as, okay, let's go to the C flag, and then you get to the C flag and there's a fight as predicted, that's not interesting because you knew that you knew there was going to be a fight there. That's the point of going there. And I think that is a part of what makes it boring, and it made those maps feel very dull and very, I feel like it makes them feel bigger than they are, which, like, bigger in a bad way, in that, there's nothing to entertain you on the way there. You just run to the flag and that's it. So maybe that's what they're going for, is just someone to sort of spruce up those, I guess, the open worlds of Battlefield, to give us some extra stuff on the way, like not having it all focused on just the flags. Someone who, because it's like that in open world games too, that on the way to your, like we were just talking about before we were recording with Outlaws, on the way to your mission, oh damn, I noticed that place from A New Hope. That's Luke's house. I'm gonna go look at that. Like there's things on the way. It gives you that push and pull where it's kind of pushing you in the direction of, hey, go do this mission, but something on the way will pull you away. And those are the moments that make you appreciate the game and kind of hook you in a bit more. Because if you just go and do just the main mission, like, it's just not that fun for the most part.
Yeah, you need that variety of experiences within the combat itself, but also within the map design. And like we've been talking about how the experience of them making one map and then cutting it up into smaller sections for the smaller game modes just doesn't work. And it's really frustrating because I feel like some of the best small maps are the ones that are designed specifically for a game mode, not one to be the master of none type experience.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll see where things go into the future, but I think it's going to be very fascinating as we get closer to Battlefield, whatever the next one is called. I think it's going to be quite interesting to see how all of these various rumors piece together and what specifically they learned from the past games, and specifically what they learned with Battlefield 2042 and how that's going to affect whatever the next game's going to be.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing we're all sort of waiting to see, isn't it? That I think we all hope they learn from their mistakes and going by the past. I'm
If
not
we're
too
going
sure
by history,
doesn't have me fully excited, but this one I definitely have a bit more. Even though I've said I don't, they've kind of lost a lot of my trust. I think the extra year that it's taken, and I think the full on backlash of 2042, because like Battlefield 5 had backlash, but it was just a lot of that was actually just to do with the fact that like, why does this character have a hook hand and all those? That's like not that much to do with the game. Whereas the backlash about 2042 was genuine. People weren't just like getting angry. It was like genuine criticism of like, this map is just so poorly designed, and what's the special, like the specialist system isn't Battlefield. And like, I feel like there was enough actual feedback there that combined with just the back-to-back fails, I feel, of Battlefield 5 and then this, as well as that extra year. That's the thing that I have a little bit of extra faith in this game than I would otherwise. I'm still not going into it thinking, oh, this is definitely going to be awesome. Like, I'm very skeptical, but yeah, I'm not going to just write it off. I think there is still a lot of hope there. And also, one thing I really hope to is that it's just next gen only. That was one thing for 2042 that was a big issue, was that they're trying to balance, realistically, it was like 5 or 6 platforms, because you've got PC, PS5, PS4, Xbox One, Xbox Series X, Xbox Series S. Like, that's 6 things you have to optimize it for. It just adds more to it. I just want it on the Series X and S, the PS5, the PC, and like just make it a stable game. And I think with that extra year, hopefully is the key word. They can land it. And like I've said in the past, I don't need this to be a 10 out of 10. Just land it nicely. It can be a 7 out of 10 at launch with a lot of potential, and it just plays well. And I'll take that as a big win. If it launches like stable, and that we look at it and go, oh, okay, it's a bit like, maybe it's a bit lacking for content right now. There's only 7 maps in the game, but like everything else is really good, and we know that there's potential there, because we've seen time and time again their live service team is very, very good, which is kind of unfortunate because that's really carried them the whole time. But yeah, that's all I'm hoping for. Just give me a stable Battlefield feeling game, and I'll be happy with that.
I am 100% on board on that. I just want something that we don't have to be like, oh man, eventually they're going to fix it. Like,
yeah.
What if this crazy idea, what if they release a game that is pretty solid at launch, and then they put all the work that they typically do on their terrible launches? What if they put that work into fruition on this game?
Because that's the thing. Instead of us being like, okay, well, this kind of sucks at launch, but like, we know they'll fix it, so let's stick with it. Imagine, instead of saying that, being like, okay, this is pretty good. Imagine when they quote unquote fix it, and that would be in this iteration. That would be not fixing it. That would be like, damn, think of all the crazy improvements they could have. They could have all these awesome new game modes that we've never seen before. There's heaps of new maps. Like, that's the thing that's why I'm sort of saying a 7 out of 10 at launch is good for me, because I know that their potential, I think if they launch a game at a 7 out of 10 and it's stable, then that potential is 10 out of 10. That game could reach a 10 out of 10 Battlefield game if they actually do that, because usually they launch it like a 4 or 5, and then their potential is kind of capped at about a 7 or maybe an 8. Like, I think Battlefield 5 was kind of capped at about an 8. That's where I'd say it ended up, about a 7 or an 8 out of 10. And it was never going to reach more than that. And 2042, I'd say, was even lower. It probably launched at like a 3 or 4, and it probably had the potential to get to 7, I feel. And that's about where it ended up. I feel like it's like, yep, that game's about a 7 out of 10 now, which after 3.5 or 2.5 years, it shouldn't be reaching a 7 out of 10. It should be reaching a 9 or a 10. That's how I feel about that.
Yeah, it should be the Battlefront 2 experience where it launched at like a 5 or a 6, and then people re-reviewed it and it had an 8.5 or a 9.
Exactly. The higher that they land, I think you can almost guarantee that DICE, provided nothing changes, who knows what happens in 3 years from now, but I feel like you can always give DICE about an extra 3 points, maybe 2 points at the least of like... If they launch it at a 6, it'll reach an 8. If they launch it at a 7, it'll reach a 9. That's kind of what I mean of like, if it lands at a 7, I'm thinking, oh man, this could end up the best Battlefield game ever by the end of it. So yeah, I wish that someone would tell them that because I don't know if they know that or if they think, we'll just fix it later. Like, no, don't get it good. Fix it now actually, and then launch it, and then you don't have to fix it and you can just make it better, and then the franchise is back. Because imagine by the end of this next Battlefield, if it's like a Battlefront 2 situation where people are like so sad that it's ended, and then they announce the next one after that, that will sell crazy numbers. Because imagine if Battlefront 2, when that got cancelled, imagine they announced Battlefront 3, that would have sold like 20 million copies. So that's kind of what I mean of like, this could really bring the franchise back compared to where it is. And that's just my hope. This next game for me is a bit of a leapfrog situation of I think this just needs to build the foundation to get it back. I don't think this game will bring it back, but it can get us so that the next one after this, the hype is through the roof and it's doing, back to that Battlefield 1 moment of like, oh man, this is actually now competing with Call of Duty, because this next one just definitely won't. Even if it's really good, it just won't do that. Yeah.
I hope so, man. I hope we can sit here as we get closer and as we see trailers that this is the game that we've kind of expected Battlefield 2040 to be. But time will only tell. But let us know your thoughts in the comments below if you're watching this on YouTube, or contact at uplinkpodcast.com if you're watching this wherever you find podcasts, or listen to this wherever you find podcasts. As always, check out Sammy Boy's YouTube channels. He's got a bunch of great Star Wars Outlaws content, and he's been putting the nose to the grindstone on all of that recently. So check that out. If you're into Star Wars as well, check out Star Wars Uplink. As always, we'll see you later, video gamers.